The Syrian army says it has fully recaptured a key neighborhood of Aleppo after an intense battle with insurgents. A military source told the Xinhua news agency that the military retook the Masakan Hanano area, the largest rebel-held district in eastern Aleppo. It was the first area to be stormed by rebels in mid-2012. The latest fighting took place outside Jash al-Fateh, or the Army of Conquest, a coalition of extreme jihadist groups. Observers say capturing the Masakan Hanano area will expose the Sakra neighborhood to the Syrian army, enabling it to isolate the north of the rebel-held area of Aleppo from the south.
An estimated 1.5 million people rallied in Seoul on Saturday in the fifth week of protests against President Park Geun-hye. Three major opposition parties sent delegates to attend the protest and said they would jointly submit a draft impeachment proposal to the parliament next month. Opposition say 40 MPs from the ruling Sunuri party support the proposal.
Meanwhile, in the United States, police in the state of North Dakota have arrested more than 30 activists who were protesting a controversial oil pipeline. Now, the arrests were made in Bismarck while demonstrators, including members of a Native American tribe known as the Standing Rock Sioux, gathered outside a shopping mall. Now, the incident was the latest in a string of protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline. Protesters argue that the pipeline would disturb sacred land and pollute waterways supplying nearby homes. The 1,900-kilometer pipeline would offer the fastest and most direct route to bring shale oil from North Dakota north of Standing Rock Sioux tribe's lands to Illinois. Crossing over to Missouri, joined by author and political commentator, Mr. Dean Henderson. Thank you so much for being with us. Well, it seems like we have definitely a clash of oil and big business against the environment and those trying to protect the environment. How do you see this playing itself out? Because so far, after months of this standstill, we have seen arrests, we have seen abuse, we have seen tear gas used, and we have seen basically this story being ignored by the mainstream media.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You know, it's funny that this Standing Rock Reservation is less than 100 miles from my hometown in South Dakota, across the border. My father and I used to take me hunting for grouse and antelope on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, which is adjacent to Standing Rock. And, you know, this is the Lakota Sioux people and their warrior society where, you know, it's valued, and they're making a stand here, these water protectors. And then people are coming in, so there's just conflicts of interest everywhere. Jack Dalrymple, the governor of North Dakota, owns shares in ExxonMobil, which owns XTO Partners. They have a quarter interest in this Dakota Access Pipeline. It comes out in the New York Daily News, I think just yesterday, that Trump owns shares now in the the Energy Transfer Partners, and also in Phillips 66, which is a quarter owner. And it's being funded by HSBC, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, UBS Switzerland. And so this is a globalization versus a people battle. These water protectors, these lawyers are standing their ground. It's the biggest gathering of Native people, they say, in history. Now over 200 tribes are being represented and showing up. And yes, being totally ignored by the mainstream media, of course, because they're in cahoots with these oil and pipeline barons. But, you know, the thing is, Trump's president now. I've noticed an uptick in sort of, you know, white supremacy, and, you know, that's the danger with Trump. And, you know, so it's a very volatile time right now, and, you know, really it'd be nice to see President Obama or somebody federal level go out to North Dakota and rein these cops in and rein these National Guard people. It's just kind of like, you know, Bull Connor in the 60s in Birmingham against blacks, and that's what LBJ had to do. So he better do this before Trump takes power, especially now that you know Trump, you know, has this ownership in this pipeline.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Dean Henderson, author and political commentator out of Missouri.
Government forces have recaptured the largest rebel-held districts of Aleppo. The Sana news agency said government troops retook full control of Masakan Hanano and the area around the district on Saturday. And army engineers are clearing bombs and planted explosives in the streets and squares there. But one rebel group said fighting was still underway on the edges of the district. The area was the first district that fell into the hands of rebels in 2012. Fully recapturing the districts would be a major breakthrough in the government's offensive to retake Aleppo.
South Korea has seen what is estimated to be its biggest protest in 5 weeks of demonstrations calling for the president to step down. According to organizers, up to 1.5 million people took to the streets of Seoul, while police put the number in the hundreds of thousands. One of the protest organizers said it's become apparent that Park Geun-hye as a criminal is neither qualified nor capable of being president. She needs to step down immediately. Ms. Park is accused of allowing a friend to meddle in state affairs and commit extortion. She has publicly apologized twice over the affair but refuses to resign. She's now facing a possible impeachment. The National Assembly is to vote on a bill by December 9th.
US President-elect Donald Trump was quick to denounce Hillary Clinton's decision to help with efforts to secure vote recounts in several states, dismissing the notion as ridiculous. Defending the results of the recent presidential election, which saw him narrowly clinch victory, Trump said in a statement that the voters have spoken and the election is over. Clinton's presidential campaign said on Saturday it would aid Green Party nominee Jill Stein's push for recounts, despite the Obama administration declaring the result the will of the American people. Stein, whose efforts Trump said are a scam, believes there is evidence that voting equipment used by some states had been tampered with.
Are tired of being taught.
Nachula is patiently waiting to receive her beads to start making crafts. For her, it's more than just artwork. It's a means to earn a living for her and her young daughter. Like many other South Sudanese women, Nachula has lived through conflict.
I never learned to read or went to school. During the fighting in this country, I was young and we kept escaping to the bush. We had to stay in camps in Pachala.
Women in South Sudan make up nearly half of the population, but life for them is not easy. The UN says they are 3 times likely to die in childbirth than finish school. The conflict in the country makes things harder. Ruth Lugar hails from this women's center in the capital, Juba. She says a lot is expected of these women.
Women are forced at least to contribute in something, apart from what they do in the house. They're trying to do every means of work to earn income for their families. Individual-wise, some are going through hardships of breakdown, of divorce, of separation, and all that.
Most women don't have proper jobs. South Sudan has been in conflict for nearly 3 years, with tens of thousands killed and more than 2.4 million displaced. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees says that 75% of the displaced are women and children. Reports indicate the women face rape when stepping out of camps in search of firewood to cook food for their children. Those who live in urban areas are not better off.
With the high rate of illiteracy, many women turn to informal jobs to be able to support themselves. But the money that they earn is not enough to sustain them, as most of the women are the sole bread earners of their families.
Development agencies say it's the lack of opportunity that makes it harder for women in South Sudan to progress.
Women are at the front and center of the shocks of conflict, and therefore the condition of women, given the general deprivations and the general sort of low development indicators across South Sudan, it becomes much more exacerbated and they are quite worse off.
And as the conflict continues, women like Nachula say they live in fear that their children will face the same hardships they did and never be able to live a better life. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Juba, South Sudan.
The starting point of a reform is to overtake authoritarian bicameralism that is not so frequent in Europe. The senators will count less, and it is in other countries we saw in the slides, senators represent the local autonomies. That are the mayors and regional councillors. So mayors and regional councillors will go to the Senate as happens in France.
Renzi said the reform will make it easier for the government to pass legislation and increase stability and efficiency. However, he said he will resign if a no result is returned.
In other parts of the capital, however, thousands of activists marched against Renzi's proposal, arguing it as an anti-democratic campaign. A leader of an opposition party said the proposal curtails the people's rights.
We have to bring out the scepter of no and pound it in their face. Our no is not a political no. It's a no for every individual. It's an existential no, a social no. Let's search inside your personal no. Say no to gratification that you do not deserve. Say your personal no.
The Turkish military says Islamic State militants have fired a rocket in northern Syria that caused symptoms of chemical gas exposure in 22 Turkish-backed rebels. The rebels are reported to have transferred to a hospital in Turkey after complaining of constant sickness and severe headaches. The Turkish-backed rebels are reported to have been besieging the ISIL-controlled town of Al-Bab, which Ankara says is part of an operation to push the jihadists away from the Turkey-Syria border.
Sveshye in eastern Ukraine has been in no man's land since the conflict between pro-Russian separatists and the Ukrainian military broke out in April 2014. The inhabitants have been cut off from the world without access to food, medical care or their pensions. Since September, the UN Refugee Agency has managed to send buses twice a week to take the locals to neighbouring towns. Here they gather to seek legal counsel. It was incredibly helpful because we were cut off here. No one could get to us and we couldn't go anywhere. The sound of gunfire is a constant reminder to the locals of the danger on their doorstep. We have no light. They shoot at us and we have no light, no coal and no wood. Homes have been destroyed and there's no school, church or hospital. When Tamara hears gunfire, she says, I run to the corner and I hide. Many residents say they barely had enough fuel to last the winter, and it is estimated that over 3 million people living along the front lines of the conflict are in need of assistance.
We are back right now with some headlines, starting with a Fox News alert. A hail of gunfire erupts on New Orleans' iconic Bourbon Street, sending hundreds of partiers running for their lives. One person is dead and 9 others are injured. Police arriving to a chaotic scene packed with tourists in the French Quarter.
I got one shot in the chest, I got one shot in the hand, I got another one shot somewhere else I can't tell right now. And I need that EMS ASAP.
One of the shooting victims under arrest right now for illegally carrying a gun. And
Authorities are investigating after a device exploded outside of a police barracks on the outskirts of Bologna, hours before Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi was due to visit the city. Nobody was hurt in the blast, and Italian news agency ANSA reported 10 officers were sleeping inside the building at the time of the explosion. Renzi is campaigning a week before Italians vote on a referendum on constitutional reform, but it's not clear if the blast is linked to the issue.
We now move on to the far west Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, where rescue operations continue after Saturday's magnitude 6.7 earthquake shook Akatao County, killing 1 person and damaging 41 houses. By Sunday afternoon, 520 aftershocks ranging from magnitude 3 to 5 had broken Akatao. A second round of relief supplies, including rice, flour, vegetables, cans, and stoves, has been dispatched. This is Xinjiang's most serious earthquake in years. It was caused by activity in the Himalayas seismic belt.
Otto was the first hurricane ever known to have hit Costa Rica, and it caused a national emergency to be declared. In a tweet, Costa Rica's president said that at least 9 people had been killed and 2,500 evacuated. He declared 3 days of national mourning. At least another 6 people are also known to be missing. Otto battered the country with high winds and torrential rain after it arrived on Thursday morning. Severe weather caused by Otto killed 4 people in Panama earlier in the week. Now an extensive cleanup operation is underway, and among the debris, 1 dog was rescued. After leaving Costa Rica, Otto weakened into a tropical storm.
Cuban revolutionary icon Fidel Castro has died at the age of 90. President Raul Castro announced Fidel's death in the capital Havana without giving any further details. The revolutionary and former president led the communist Cuba for half a century. Castro retreated from the public eye in 2006 due to health problems. Former U.S. Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein has officially requested a vote recount in the state of Wisconsin, where she intends to challenge the recent election results. Wisconsin's election commission said it is preparing to move forward with a statewide recount following her request. People in the U.S. cities of Seattle and Chicago have demonstrated in solidarity with the victims of police brutality. Thousands of protesters and Black Lives Matter activists took part in the rallies to draw attention to police shootings of African Americans. The U.S. has witnessed mass rallies against police brutality in recent years. Iraqi Popular Mobilization units have urged the U.S.-led coalition of the war-torn country to provide convincing explanation about a guided missile fired at the unit's commanders near Mosul. The PMU noted that the missile landed near the tent of the commanders in Tel Afar Airport. Pakistani authorities have imposed a partial curfew in a federally administered tribal area following a militant attack on an army facility. 2 military personnel were killed while trying to foil a suicide attack at the Gulnai camp in Mahmad Agency. 4 terrorists who attempted to enter the camp have been killed. Yemeni officials warned that the health situation in the country is deteriorating due to Saudi Arabia's deadly war. They say Riyadh's blockade on Yemen has left hospitals and medical facilities understaffed and without enough medicine to deal with the health crisis. South Sudan has finally agreed to the deployment of a UN-mandated regional force to deal with the country's 3 years of civil war. The announcement came after lengthy deliberations during a cabinet meeting chaired by President Salva Kiir. No details were given about when and where the force would be deployed.
a former Boko Haram headquarters, gutted by battle. This was once a busy commercial bank, but the insurgents took it over when they overran this town called Dikwa back in 2014. The Nigerian military is back in control here, but as Boko Haram fighters fled, they destroyed much of the town's infrastructure. Downed telephone masts, lethal reminders of just how cut off residents here are. Humanitarian assistance is slowly getting into Dikwa. It's urgently needed.
So this child is severely malnourished. You've seen that the prominent ribs, okay, and you can see that the child is weak.
UNICEF estimates that 400,000 children in northeastern Nigeria will suffer severe acute malnutrition this year. Without treatment, approximately 1 in 5 of those children, more than 75,000, is likely to die. But where it's safe enough for aid to get in, improvements can quickly be seen.
Good. When we came in April, when this area was newly opened up, we were seeing severe acute malnutrition rates of about 15%. That was really, really bad. And through our intervention, things have really improved.
For now, the immediate priority is saving the lives of families and children affected by issues such as malnutrition here in the northeast. But the longer this conflict continues, the greater the risk of a lost generation of children who've grown up separated from their families, away from home, and unable to access basic services like education.
About 20,000 people live in this camp in the state capital. Families fled here from surrounding villages to escape the violence. There are thousands of children. A few months ago, this school was set up. The walls may be made of straw and there are no desks, but for some, these are the first lessons they've had in years.
I've not been to school before, but now I'm in class. I got a few school things like a uniform and shoes.
Humanitarian assistance has been scaled up in northeastern Nigeria over the past few months, but access is dependent on security. The Nigerian military has retaken most of the towns in Borno State from Boko Haram, but the militants' retaliatory suicide bomb attacks are becoming more frequent and increasingly targeting the most vulnerable. Katerina Vitozzi, CCTV, Maiduguri, Nigeria.
Friday prayers in the Grand Mosque were soon followed by violence. Indian police used tear gas and rubber-coated bullets against stone-throwing protesters carrying the Pakistani flag. The protesters say security forces have prevented prayers in the mosque for months.
We're protesting just because from last 150 days, this mosque has been seized, unfortunately. We don't have our religious freedom that they say in democracy there is freedom of religion. But unfortunately, in Kashmir there is no concept of religious freedom.
This is the first Friday prayer to be allowed in the mosque since early July. It's not clear if the lifting of the ban is indefinite, and the chief imam of the mosque, Mirwais Omar Farouk, remains under house arrest. A large number of worshippers seized the opportunity to show their anger at the government measures.
This struggle is for Kashmir. The new generation is very courageous and has passion. They want freedom. All the youngsters want freedom. The Kashmir dispute is a cancer for Kashmiris and for India and Pakistan. If these two nuclear powers don't engage in a dialogue, everything will be destroyed.
Elsewhere on Friday, Indian commanders said one soldier and what they described as 2 militants were killed in a gun battle in the Bandipora district. 2 policemen were killed and another seriously wounded in a separate attack in the northern district of Jammu. Unrest in the Indian administered part of Kashmir reignited in July following the killing of a Kashmiri protest leader. Indian forces also launched a series of operations against suspected fighters sneaking across the border from Pakistan. Sporadic incidents across the dividing line between the two parts of the disputed region are continuing. Around 100 civilians have been killed and thousands wounded in the recent fighting involving security forces, and the civil disobedience program is crippling everyday life. As in every instance since the dispute started over Kashmir in 1948, Indian and Pakistani government leaders blame each other. Mohammed Val, Al Jazeera.
The impact of days of bad weather in northern Italy. This was Imperia on Friday, some 50 kilometers from the French border. An elderly fisherman died in the surrounding Liguria region. At least 2 others are missing in northern Italy, another in Sicily. As rivers broke their banks, in Turin, 2 tourist boats were swept away until their path was barred. The Prime Minister visited the city where the flooding has caused havoc. Referring to floods over 20 years ago that killed dozens of people, Matteo Renzi said, "The work that's been done since has allowed us to face an emergency situation very close to that of 1994. At the moment, the management of this situation has been flawless, especially with ordinary citizens taking part." Bridges and roads closed, cars carried off by the floods, hundreds of people evacuated, others in trouble too. 2 regions in northern Italy have been on red alert over flooding since Thursday. A state of natural disaster has been declared, paving the way for national funds and resources to be deployed.
Smoke billows above a market in downtown Mogadishu. Minutes later, we arrive at the scene. Security forces and bomb experts have cordoned off the site. This is all that remains of the minivan carrying the bomb, detonated at this popular market not far from the main police training academy. It's one of the busiest and crowded markets here in downtown Mogadishu. The explosion went off at exactly midday, and behind me, locals are backed by authorities are trying to pull out bodies from the rubble.
When we arrived, there was heavy gunfire. We carried 13 people to hospital and came back to collect the dead, at least 28 bodies.
This market is popular with women, making a living from mostly selling vegetables and food supplies. Some are making phone calls trying to know the whereabouts of their family members. Minutes later, a young man badly injured is rescued.
I was among the first to arrive at the scene. It is such a terrible thing to happen in a public place. The owner of the shop behind me has lost both her legs. Many others have died and others have been hospitalized. This is just a regular market. A vehicle with a bomb in it was left to the middle of the road. This isn't a government building or an institution. These attackers clearly wanted maximum casualties.
There's been no claim of responsibility yet, but the incident bears all the hallmarks of an Al-Shabaab attack. It comes 3 weeks after the militant group detonated a car laden with explosives at this police checkpoint, killing at least 9 people. Meanwhile, Somalia's police commissioner says security in the capital has been increased ahead of presidential polls, which are set down for the 30th of November. Abdulaziz Bilon, CCTV, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The United Nations has declared November 25th to be the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and unions led a significant demonstration to support women in France.
Globally, more than 1/3 of all women have been beaten, abused, or forced into sex, and most of the time it occurs in their own home. France has one of the highest rates of domestic violence in all of Europe.
Around 10% of abused women in France come forward to the police, which is close to the average rate. causing many to say there is a cultural problem.
What's needed is a true political will to change at every level of government. The problem of violence against women needs to be made a priority in public policy. What's certain is that without a radical change, more women will suffer and die.
20% of all homicides are caused by domestic violence in France. Another inflated statistic, as one woman is murdered every 3 days. France also has a major legal problem with abused women. Out of the 90,000 rapes every year, there's a conviction in less than 2% of all cases.
I am a woman who has been raped and who has also been ignored by the justice system. When there is no justice, rapists will never stop their crimes, and that's why we are raising our voices without any shame.
Economic austerity policies can be blamed for increasing violence towards women because France's increasing poverty rate corresponds with higher rates of domestic violence. What's more, budget cuts have reduced the number of social workers available to treat abused women, as well as free legal assistance. France's Islamophobic measures, such as the anti-burqa law and the hysteria caused by the ongoing state of emergency, have also increased violence against women. Hate crimes, which have soared since the Charlie Hebdo attacks, overwhelmingly target women. Rami Mazaheri, Press TV, Paris.
Security is tight and highly visible here in Bamako. Armed soldiers stand guard, checking and registering every visitor. Roads leading to big hotels are barricaded.
When you present yourself and your luggage passes through a scanner and you pass through security gates. Once you go through the security gates, we use a metal detector to check if the problem is not with your belt. If it is not the case, you are welcome. For the car, the same thing. Also go through this process. There is a screen control in which suspicious objects are detected. At this moment, you have access to the hotel. Once inside, we already know that you are safe.
These security procedures were implemented after last year's fatal terror attack. Armed gunmen stormed the Radisson Blu Hotel in November 2015. They took 170 hostages and killed 21 people.
As you know, November the 20th is the one-year anniversary of the attack. So we have taken all security measures, and we've reinforced military staff, as you can see. These measures must continue to prove that we have a strong army. We have 12 soldiers and 12 policemen operating 24/7.
Many hotels in the Malian capital have upgraded their security measures to reassure visitors.
First, we didn't have the security, but after the Radisson attack, I think after the Radisson attack, because UN, they do a plan for each hotel in Bamako, and they come to each hotel, and they came to us before. They give us the plan what we need to do in each step.
Mali was plunged into violence after a military coup in March 2012 left a power vacuum that allowed Islamist militants to join forces with separatists and seize control of the north of the country. While French forces pushed the militants out of most of their strongholds in 2013, the government is struggling to reassert its authority, leaving Bamako vulnerable to terrorist incidents. Matthew Edwards, CCTV.